This video is about a talk I gave for the Science of Consciousness conference in Barcelona this year. Its title is Metaphors and the Mind-Body Problem. But by the time I came to give the talk, I decided that not all metaphors were such a good idea. So a better title for my talk is Accurate Descriptions and the Mind-Body Problem. My aim is to describe a couple of well-known metaphors, point out their weaknesses, and show how they can be improved. I'd like to state briefly what I would find desirable in any adequate solution to the mind-body problem. First is a clear ontology, and I want to be realistic about both the mental and the physical. The latter implies consistency with and engagement with contemporary physics, and the former implies consistency with our self-understanding as minds and agents. My contention is that libertarian free agency is consistent with physics. Finally, we require a lucid explanation of the mind-physics relationship without any fudge. The first metaphor is that from the outside, your brain is a lump of organic matter obeying physical laws, whereas from the inside, this same entity is your mind. This illustration from the 2008 conference is evocative of this idea. I especially love it because it illustrates that the true physics of the world might be much weirder than is given by our initial naive perceptions. From the outside, your brain is a physical system that obeys exactly the same physical laws as everything else, and this even includes the Born rule of quantum mechanics, insofar as this can be measured on a living system. We can also X-ray or scan or even dissect the brain. But from the inside, from your experiences as a person, this same entity is your mind. The picture hints at the experiences of a person watching a punting party. If we remain physicalists, then when we try to explain the relationship between mind and body using this metaphor, we hit severe snags. Recall that physicalism is the metaphysical position that physics is primary, and that mind must be explained in terms of physics. The first problem is that, whatever the situation, physical laws do all the causal work. Mind must therefore be irrelevant to behavior. In other words, non-zombies such as ourselves are absurd. This forces us towards panpsychism, the position that mind, or mental properties at least, exist everywhere as a brute fact. But this is of no help. How can these fundamental mental properties of, say, a water molecule do any causal work? The laws of physics do all the causal work already. I'm going to show how the outside-inside metaphor works much better from a position called pan-idealism. First, I must explain pan-idealism. Recall that panpsychism is the position that everything that exists has mental properties. As such, panpsychism is a variety of physicalism. In contrast, pan-idealism is the position that everything that exists is a mind. As such, it is a far more radical position, being a variety of idealism. The catalogue of things that exists is the same in all cases, in standard physicalism, panpsychism, and pan-idealism. So, atoms, molecules, birds, tables, and planets, etc., exist in all three systems. So, the fundamental ontology is that the world consists of a plurality of minds. All of physics is entirely secondary, and all of physics must be explained solely in terms of these minds. We must say more about these minds. There are a multitude of minds which are omnipresent. Omnipresent and other similar spatiotemporal words must eventually be explained in terms of minds. Each mind has a qualitative percept of other minds, and each mind possesses agency. Most minds are extremely simple. They cannot think, but because of this, they cannot misperceive their surroundings. A photon in a Young-Slits experiment has different propensities to behave depending on the entirety of its surroundings, for instance, on whether one or two slits are open. This suggests that the photon can both perceive its surroundings and that it possesses agency. This is more plausible than the claim that, quote, the photon goes through both slits at once, unquote, or explanations involving wave-particle duality. How is it possible, even in principle, that the entirety of physics can be explained wholly in terms of minds, mental properties, and mental goings-on? The answer is that humankind's sole access to the world is through our percepts. This applies to absolutely everyone, both laypeople and scientists, throughout the entire human history. I'll show that this enables us to define physics entirely in terms of mind. Panpsychism will ensure that this physics will not be gappy. The sole form of causation in pan-idealism is agency. Physical laws are merely mathematical descriptions. They do not amount to causes. There can be no causal overdetermination, so libertarian free will is possible in pan-idealism. Each physical property, length for example, is identical to a specific optimal synthesis of the mathematical structures within the percepts of all minds. I call such a mathematical synthesis intersubjective consilience. We assume that such syntheses exist as a mathematical fact, even though we don't ourselves have access to all percepts. I'll give the example of length, where we're attempting to measure the length of a bone. A scientist sees this situation and realizes that the bone and the ruler take up equal portions of her visual percept. She concludes that the bone is 5 centimeters long, but scientific results aren't valid until they've been confirmed by others. Another scientist agrees, and they decide to publish. Now, if we were to try to define length in terms of human intersubjective consilience alone, this would be hopelessly anthropocentric. So now let's consider a dog. Dogs are closely related to humans, and we can be very confident that their visual percepts are extremely similar to our own. So even though they have limited cognitive powers, their percept confirms our own according to the principle of intersubjective consilience. And in fact, even if the humans were to leave the laboratory, the dog's percept provides some evidence for the length of the bone. We arrive at an important definition. Physical length is the maximal intersubjective consilience of perceived length. And it is derived by combining the percepts of all minds. This definition is no longer anthropocentric, and recall that minds are plentiful throughout the room and in the bone and ruler themselves. We can now sketch physics in pan-idealism. We use intersubjective consilience to define length, as we've just shown. we can define time along somewhat similar lines. And in this way, I hope you can see that essentially we've defined space-time. In essence, we've defined physics because physics is essentially goings-on in space-time. These ideas can be fleshed out in detail, but I won't do this here. Physics is thus fully explained in terms of consistencies between the percepts of minds. Any attempt at further explanation reintroduces paradoxes, such as dualism or causal overdetermination. The claim that there is also a real physical distance between entities over and above the definition of distance given here is meaningless. Just cover the metaphor of grammatical viewpoints briefly. From the first-person viewpoint, I am a mind. By definition, the first-person viewpoint is how I perceive myself and the world. And from the third-person viewpoint, I am a physical system. By definition, the third-person viewpoint is the viewpoint of a mythical, omniscient, objective observer. This is the same as the viewpoint of physicalism, which is bad metaphysics. Instead, pan-idealism makes use of the second-person viewpoint to understand me as a physical system. Here, by standard definition, the second-person viewpoint means the intersubjective viewpoint. This is also the viewpoint of science, as this is actually practiced. When we restrict persons to be human minds, we get science as a human endeavour and our contemporary physical understanding. But when we take persons to include all minds, we get the true objective physics of the universe. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer your questions or comments in the discussion below. In my 2022 book, I give much more complete detail linking pan-idealism to contemporary physics than I've had time to sketch here.